Welcome to Behaviorally Speaking, Leadership for Changemakers, the podcast where we explore how behavior shapes leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Esther Bubb, and this episode is brought to you by Esther C. Bubb AV Services. Today, we conclude our three-part series, Regulated to Lead Trauma, Toxic Stress, and the Responsive Systems That Shape Behavior, with part 3, From Awareness to Action, Creating Healing-Centered Leadership Cultures. Part 1 helped us understand behavior, and part 2 focused on responsive leadership in action. Today, we ask, how do we build systems that sustain healing-centered practice? I'm joined once again by Shannon Fitzpatrick Thomas and Tracey Wise, whose work helps bridge individual practice and systemic change. But before we dive in, a quick note for you listeners. There was a fitting moment of rupture and repair in this recording. Due to a recording glitch, the first few minutes of this rich conversation weren't captured, including our opening check-in and early discussion about translating healing-centered leadership from values into everyday practice. But rather than recreate what was missed, I'm inviting you into the dialogue where we resumed, because in many ways, that mirrors leadership itself. We don't always begin perfectly, but we can repair, we can reconnect, and we can move forward. Shannon and Tracey began by grounding us in how regulation shows up personally and in leadership. We explored how healing-centered leadership moves beyond value statements into daily relational practices such as psychological safety, reflective supervision, feedback systems, and routines that support belonging. We then moved into one of the many tensions that leaders face, resistance to change. And that's where we join the conversation as Shannon reframes resistance not as opposition, but as opportunity, and shares strategies for moving stakeholders from skepticism toward shared ownership in a healing-centered culture. So now, let's dive in.
I think it's important to see resistance as an opportunity because, like Tracey said, when we see staff, be it teachers, be it, other types of employees from other organizations, change is scary. Change is difficult. And so instead of labeling it resistance, it's, there's opportunity there to kind of teach, mentor, and, be present as a leader to help the employee feel more comfortable in engaging on the new policy or integrating trauma-informed care into their daily practices, instead of like forcing policy or mandating policy on them. We have to kind of roll with it with them and have a soft rollout so that the change isn't so fearful and then defined as resistance, and then you're kind of losing credibility. So I see resistance or the perception of resistance as an opportunity, because that gives us the time as a leader to connect with our employees or those that we're supporting to help them move through that.
Yeah, Shannon, you talked about connecting, right? And so it makes me also think of supervision too, right? And what role, and I know you talked about this before in previous episodes, Shannon, but like what role does supervision play in trauma responsive leadership, right? So sort of moving away from, all right, it's your check-in, what's on your list, all right, let's get through this list and be done with it. But how can we really set it up to function as a space for, feedback, support, reflection, growth, for listening, for hearing the other person, for sharing ideas, where it's more like relationship-based and this is just a task we need to complete?
Well, when you do trauma-informed supervision, I tended to have like an outline that I utilize with all of my employees. And that had everything built into it. So it was building that relationship with the employee. It was providing the space so that they felt comfortable to ask questions or to disclose that maybe they need some more assistance on this project. But it also didn't just provide opportunities for like brief check-ins, but also skill building. And so that trauma-informed philosophy if you can integrate it into your supervision, it's really helpful. I really think it starts to like shift some of those power dynamics that are sometimes felt in that leader-employee relationship. And so we have to start seeing supervision as like a partnership. And I definitely, you grow as a leader, as a supervisor. I probably did things better towards the end of my professional career than I did, when I was working at the residential treatment center when I was 22 years old supervising people. So you have to grow, and you have to understand that, we're not always going to be at our best, but if you can integrate aspects of trauma-informed supervision into how you manage your employees, it's going to be a benefit, because you can also build in opportunities for grounding, right? And so, Tracey talked about like icebreakers or, doing some, simple deep breathing. Not everybody's going to do deep breathing with their supervisor, but, I've had to do that with some employees, and that's okay, because that's what they needed in that moment. And so there's great opportunity in supervision, and being a trauma responsive leader.
Tracey, what does supervision look like for you?
I think that there's a cross between supervision and evaluation.
Right.
And I would like the educational system to be more trauma informed when it comes to their evaluation and supervision system. I'm trying to answer politically correct. But when it comes to the education, it doesn't allow our evaluation and supervision system doesn't allow for a trauma informed. I don't know if response connection is the right word, and that just stinks. As a leader, supervision for me looks like connecting with individuals. So when I sit down and have those evaluative conversations, I'm doing it in a trauma-informed way, because that's who I am.
Gotcha.
The actual, like I said, the evaluation system and supervision system in education isn't built under a trauma-informed lens, but as a leader, you can have those conversations. You can have those relationships when you are in those moments with your staff. It's not always having like the answers, but it's similar to what Shannon said, is just creating that safe space, whether it's for reflection, whether it's for a meltdown, whether it's for to say what's on their mind. And then for you as a leader to also be able to have those conversations to say, hey, I need you to step up, or I saw this and I'd like to see it look this way. So that safe space is on both ends for you as a leader, and then for your staff.
Yeah. So on that note, Tracey, of safe space, like I like that. How can leaders, right? How can supervisors model and normalize help-seeking, right, behaviors? Because sometimes people want to ask for help, but they don't want to because they feel like they might perceive as, well, like, you should know that, and leaders sometimes might feel the same way and not want to ask for help. But how can we normalize that, Tracey, where it's okay to ask for help, whether it's, the leader, whether it's the supervisor, whether it's the staff, and at the same time build, that psychological safety rather than, feel like our authority is being undermined because, we're asking for help or our knowledge,
Well, I always say I am only as good as the people around me. So when I look at if I'm doing a good job, it's because of everyone who is surrounding me. And I'm always turning to people, whether it's within my building, colleagues in other buildings, in other districts, in other fields, saying, hey, I have this case, what do you think? Because you're always learning, especially in the field of special education. We talk about individualized education plans. Our students are very individualized. Every situation is different. Every trauma response is different. So I think being able to, as a leader, go to anyone. Look, I go to my facilities director to say, I don't know how to fix a toilet or whatever it is. This is what the problem is. That's not my area of expertise. If you have a kid and there's a behavior you need me to help fix it, I'm your girl. Other than that, I'm always like, I don't know if I can help. So being honest and being able to say that to your colleagues, I still pick up the phone. Shannon and I haven't worked directly together in years, and I'll text her in a second. I'm in a whole nother county and say, hey, I have this situation. Who do I connect with out here? So being able to pick up that phone, because you're not perfect. You don't have all the answers.
Yeah, 100%. What would you say, Shannon? Normalizing asking for help.
Like Tracey said, if you're not learning, you're not growing. And so every day you should be able to build in capacity for learning, right? Be it know who to call for resources or, seek, education and knowledge on your, by yourself. One thing that I remember that I found very helpful in my past career was seeing some of those help seeking opportunities built into the human resources structure. So I recall being part of a mentor program for the treatment center where I worked. And we had different levels of individuals working together to build up a mentor program so staff felt comfortable going to their peers, right? Not all the time are individuals seeking out help from their supervisor or their director because they could be, not confident that they won't get in trouble. They don't want to seem like they don't have the skills. And so that peer mentor program didn't just help to secure retention and, make sure that individuals felt comfortable increasing their skills, but really there was individuals from all different levels in the organization where anybody could go to. A facilities person could go talk to another peer. And so it was great. So I really like organizations that do really think out of the box and build some of those help-seeking types of, programs or systems within their organization.
Yeah. You mentioned trust. You didn't use the word trust, but part of what you said really, hinged on trust. So on that note, Shannon, like how can organizations build trust, right? And because we know trust is something that's so important, right? Easy to lose, but hard to gain sometimes, right? And so what are some of the things organizations can do, Shannon, to really build trust? Trust, first of all, in the people in the organization, but also in the organization itself. Because if that's there's that level of comfortability, as you were saying, right? And so that sort of reduces the level of stress and, burnout and things like that. What are some of the things we can do as individuals, as leaders, as supervisors, but as organizations globally to, build trust?
Well, if I had the answers, I probably wouldn't be as smart as I am. But, you're right. I think, trust is so important. It builds in for the workforce predictability, transparency, consistency. When you start looking at the trauma-informed care principles, safety, trust, empowerment, collaboration, that also has to be in existence in organizations. If safety's not there, environmental or emotional safety, personal safety, collaboration, if that's not occurring, trust, that's one of the main things. If you can't rely on your director or, the CEO or even your peers, then it's not going to have a good turnout. I think individuals are going to be, moving towards, fear and not producing or being able to engage with those that they serve or teach in the classroom, because that safety, that trust has to be present for employees, to be successful.
Yeah.
Or they're going to be emotionally scarred.
Yeah. I think of it too as trust that your leader, your supervisor, or your executive director, like they'll support you, right? They'll support you. I think of it that way too. What about you, Tracey? What are your thoughts on trust in organizations? And
that trust through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's what is just so invaluable, and you can't put a dollar amount on. I think the number one characteristic of that trust is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that now, and I may have had a different answer maybe a year or two ago. And I believe transparency is that number one characteristic because I didn't have it in an organization.
Yeah.
And I do now. And I never realized what that means, I guess, or looks like.
Yeah.
And it's really from the top down. So, from the very top to have that. And you and I, Esther, were talking about having one-on-one meetings and everything, and just to have that transparency. Like I said, my answer has changed, and I would say that is kind of the number one characteristic that would at least lay the foundation. Maybe that's what I want to say, lay the foundation for that trust.
Yeah, yeah. I like that because in trust we build connection, right? So today I read the great cookie kerfuffle.
Oh, geez.
To the students in one of my classroom, right? So it was all about this cookie and all the animals, groups, 1, then 2, then 3, all trying to get this one cookie. But at the end of the day, they really came together in this big huddle and just connected. And then it just became like, okay, we're all friends, we're all here for each other. Why are we all, in a big ruckus about a cookie? And so they were connecting, and then there was joy, and then there was friendship, right? So like the extension activity was like, I gave them little circles and said, all right, make a cookie, but then you have to give it to someone else. You're not making it for you. So saying all of that to say, how do emotions like joy and connection and moments of celebration, how can we celebrate each other? How can we encourage colleagues to celebrate themselves? Because to me, the connection, the joy, the trust, the celebration is so critical. It's so critical for organizations and workplaces to be like, healing centered and trauma focused. What are your thoughts there?
Well, that connection is what that regulation is, having that connection to people, to a program, to the students, to, your clients. That is kind of what brings joy. Like there's a lot of times where I'm in my office or, we're working and it's boom, boom, boom. And my principal may do this, I may do it, or our program coordinator. It's just, I'll be like, I got to go see the kids. Like, I just need to be in the program and see the kids to like bring me back to center. I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
So like those moments are real. And having that, and you can't always focus on the bad or the hard or the impossible. You really do have to focus on the good. And we said that today because it's been like a couple of us were saying it was like the longest, shortest week ever. Like everyone kept waking up. I'm like, it's not Friday yet. Like it's Wednesday. What is going on? It wasn't any one thing. It just felt like a lot. And again, we talked about the time of year and everything. It's statewide testing in Pennsylvania, so it's pretty stressful for all of us with all of the assessments.
Yeah.
But I think just recognizing that and being intentional and just knowing that we are doing good stuff. Like it's hard. It's hard work. It's really, really hard work. And again, we're dealing with human behavior. But we're doing some good stuff.
Yeah.
We need to celebrate that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious to your thoughts on this, Tracey, because sometimes when, we may recognize one person, like obviously there are times when we recognize all staff, but then sometimes if one person is recognized, you might hear staff mumbling and say, well, I should have been included, so there's that part of it. How do we handle that? What do we do? How do we encourage the other staff?
I mean, I say good morning to everyone. I know whose kids are sick, whose grandchild, who came in an Uber today, who had a cab. I don't think it's about celebrating people once a month or once a week. I think it's about all day, every day. I hug people. I tell people I love them at work, at home, it's all of that. Even there are some people, a very close colleague who told me, not everyone likes that close space, and I don't accept that. So, but I think showing up, smiling through the tough times. We dismissed today, and literally the minute of dismissal, there was a blow up, and I took a student who was at least 1.5 feet taller than me, triple my size, who was very, very heightened and aggressive. And we just walked, to regulate. And I was regulated, and an adult who wasn't regulated, and him, so you have a dysregulated adult and a dysregulated, adolescent teenager going at it, per se, whatever. And we know dysregulated adults can't regulate kids. I mean, it's evident. So, a kid has a behavior, and because you as an adult can't respond calmly, now it's even more escalated. Yeah. But I think just, showing up and just focusing on the good. Yeah, it ended the week. It ended a really hard week, like not so great. But you know what? Every kid got home. Every adult left. We made it through 5 days. God willing, everyone was healthy and everything. So, I mean, we're going to be back on Monday fighting the good fight.
Yeah, yeah. Shannon, what are your thoughts on celebrations and joy in the workplace and just healing?
Well, I love that word joy. So Tracey's right. I mean, we have to celebrate the small wins, not just those major milestones. She explained it so beautifully. Every day is a new day. There's, some bumps in the road, but everyone got home safely. Everyone had a great day at school, and you start back up on Monday. Celebrations of staff, children, employees, owners, whatever type of role we're in, should always be ongoing. It shouldn't just be when things are going well or things are over the top, but the everyday connections that we can have with each other really makes the difference. And when you look at trauma and trauma-informed organizations, the one thing we know about trauma is healed through relationships. So those connections that Tracey was explaining with the individual that was taller than her probably de-escalated well because of his connection with her. And so that's exactly, the benefit of trauma-informed care, being, an informed leader, and, celebrating the small wins, is because you never know when it's going to make a difference. And it made a great difference to her and the student today.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into what I want to talk about next, Shannon, like when Tracey talked about, how she was regulated, so she was able to help that student regulate, right? And it speaks to the importance of trauma responsive leadership, right? And creating environments that are healing centered, healing for not just the students, but also for the staff and for us as leaders, right? But there's this idea that it's important, but not only is it important, it's also urgent, right? Because something could be important, not urgent, right? And something could be urgent, whatever. So why is it important, but then also urgent that we make that shift into building healing-centered workspaces and trauma, informed workspaces? Why is that something that's so urgent today, Shannon, in 2026?
Well, it's urgent because I think those older type of leadership models or older leadership types of engagements just aren't working. Like some of that comes from that like controlled based leadership that increases harm and attrition, and you don't have a successful workforce because, like we were talking earlier, there's not trust, there's not transparency. And so like we spoke about in the prior podcast, is if your staff are coming in back here in the back part of their brain, they're moving towards chronic stress, burnout, turnover, and your organization is just not going to be sustainable. And so it's of major urgency for schools to become trauma sensitive, for community organizations to practice being trauma responsive. And whenever I go out and explain what that looks like, because I've done a lot of organizational trauma-informed care training in various types of entities and even teach it at 2 universities, and it comes down to this. It's how you engage with others.
Bottom line,
and
that's it.
And that's it. Like it was like trauma-informed. It's how you look at each other, how you are mirroring their body language, how you're listening to them and reflecting back. It comes down to that personal choice. So the more companies and organizations are leading from a trauma-informed perspective. They have it in their job descriptions, in their annual evaluations, the proper trauma-informed language, how the leader is engaging the mid-level supervisors, how the mid-level supervisors are engaging the staff is going to reflect then how they're engaging those that they're teaching or engaging. If there's any discrepancy in any of those levels, the organization isn't going to work. And is going to move towards, that ripple effect of hurting rather than healing. And so if you want better outcomes, all entities need to be trauma informed. I mean, Tracey and I tried to do this in a local county, and we were highly successful. We integrated this in educational systems, schools, community organizations, courts, local government.
It was amazing. And then unfortunately the follow through, and then that's what happens is, unfortunately things end up being built for people in a seat and not the systems. And
yeah, that's right. I like how you put it that way.
Yeah.
But there's still some good outcomes that
Absolutely,
are still present.
Yeah.
It goes down to that one person. If this one person in this department's answering the phone great, they're going to help get that person to the right door. And so that's really about
that open
coming
door
down,
policy,
open door, no wrong door, and really being willing to listen and be a kind person and engage with that person, knowing it's not what's wrong with them, it's what's happened to them. It's that trauma-informed perspective.
Yeah. It's making me think. So my conversation last week was with a colleague in the educational field. She's in Texas. We're both from Grenada. She's an evaluation coordinator, but we were talking about, it makes me think of how culture and upbringing impacts a lot of this, right? So we were talking about the way that we were raised. It's like really strict. You have to do this way. You have to do this that way. You know what I mean? And then we had to learn and teach ourselves here, it's okay to step back a bit. It's okay, for someone to make a mistake. It's okay for the children to not be perfect. It's okay. And so kind of sort of like retraining our brains to understand that it doesn't always have to be perfection, right? It's connection over perfection. Mm-hmm. And we kind of had to, just from moving here and learning those different things, even me in ABA therapy, I mean, I just, I had to, I really didn't have a choice. But I think culture plays such a big part in all of this and the way that people's beliefs and how they've raised. And so what are your thoughts, Tracey, on the urgency of this and just how our different values and beliefs might even impact, how we approach it and what we do?
It's funny, both you and Shannon used the word perfection, and I was watching this season finale of The Pit before this. Okay. And Robbie, he had a conversation with a colleague, and a colleague said, you need to stop expecting perfection from yourself when you can't even live up to it. How do you expect others? And this Robbie is the head of the ER. So, he's teaching attendings and everything, and his standards are way high and no one can reach them. But when this guy turned to him and said, how can you expect perfection from yourself when you can't reach it? You're never going to be perfect. And that means we can't be like you. We'll never live up to your standards. And that just was so eye-opening to hear, as a leader. For me, in education, I think the urgency is, and mental health, especially right now, is so important because the systems have not moved or changed as quickly as the humans and environment has. And it's killing kids. It's killing families, it's killing systems, where we still have mental health systems and crisis response systems from 20 years ago. And that doesn't seem that long ago, but it is when we're dealing with 2026 problems.
Yeah.
And that's what is broken. And if that doesn't change, what we see now is only a tip, I think, of what we're going to see. So for me, the urgency is really coming from that, not that lack of adapting, lack
Yeah.
of, adapting to the change.
Yeah.
And I think, educational systems have been able to adapt to the change somewhat, not
Yeah.
entirely,
Yeah.
and not as quickly as the human behavior, but the mental health systems, absolutely not. And that's concerning when you're dealing with those crises behaviors in young adolescents screaming for help.
Yeah.
And it's just not there. It's not available.
Yeah. And I think you also make me think of Tracey, that the generations, right? So like there's change. We're in 2026, but the generations we're dealing with now, right?
Ooh.
So
It
it's
makes
like,
me feel old. Like, I'm like, I feel like I'm my parents talking about what? I would never do that or whatever. Like,
yeah. So it's like, how do we even, like, what is the approach? How do we reach them, right? And it's just making me smile at this moment because I was on the playground this week, Tracey, and the kids, my preschoolers, right? Some with special needs, we're talking about 6, 7. So I'm just saying, like, it's a whole different generation. It's a whole different set of things we have to deal with. How do we accommodate? How do we adapt? How do we meet them where they are? How do we understand what they're saying to us? Like, I have no idea what,
you better turn the radio on, turn TikTok on, turn all of that, and get with the program, laugh, and you get down to their side, like, their level, no matter where it is. Some of the practices aren't going to change, but again, the delivery will, how we respond will. And it's funny, I was doing like research for, our podcast and everything and looking, and I saw a saying that said the urgency comes from this. We can't expect regulated, engaged outcomes from dysregulated environments. And I just thought that was so huge. Like, not even just the environment. I mean, think of some of the environments, whether it's where your students come from, that we're expecting students to learn in. Some of the environments that we're asking students to learn in aren't regulated, whether, the buildings are falling apart, or, there's gunshots outside, or, the air pollution is huge. There's area that has, wildfires and the air pollution. There's traumas and natural disasters everywhere. So thinking of all of that, and that really sat with me.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Tracey, thank you so much. So,
thank you.
If with all of this stuff you shared and all of your lovely research, thank you for doing that. If listeners take one step this week, right, Tracey, to move from awareness to action, to move from thought to implementation, right, in creating healing-centered cultures, right, and thinking of culture as this broad term, Tracey, right, culture of, how we grow up, but also within the organization. What should it be, right? And what mindset should they really lean on to guide them, as they lead, complex systems? You kind of talked about that without using that word, but you were saying it's just so complex, what we're dealing with now. What would be one thing they could work on this week?
As a leader, thinking about whoever that person is standing right in front of you and what they need from you at that moment. Right then and there, and making that mind shift from, and Shannon said this, we've talked about this throughout the series, from reactive to responsive. You don't have to react to every single comment or situation, or but how are you going to respond? And changing that mind shift. There's a big difference between reacting and responding, and creating that environment where people have that mindset of, I can do it. Yeah. I will do it. Because like the support's there, the environment's there, and we're leading with that, belief that we're going to make good changes.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. How about you, Shannon? What would you want them to walk away with, or what can they do this week?
Not to make it over the top for them, for leaders or organizations, but keeping it really simple for them. Sometimes organizational change can become overwhelming. So starting really, really small. I think like small, consistent shifts create that systemic change over time. Tracey and I have seen that. I have a couple words that, Tracey just talked about, is really focusing on progress over perfection, curiosity over control, relationship over urgency, and to really help our leaders in education and in other fields to remember that we're not just managing tasks as leaders. We are shaping environments that shape people.
I
Yeah.
like that. Yes.
I like that. Did you say curiosity over control?
Yes.
Yeah. I like that. It makes me think of so Tracy and I, our former supervisor from our previous job, Dr. Hess, she always used the phrase, help me understand,
Oh, yeah.
right? So you say it really made me think about that, like curiosity versus control. Like help me understand. Like we want to find out. We just want to be curious. We want to be inquisitive. We want to understand the why. Like sort of seek to understand rather than to be understood. So I did like that one, curiosity over control. Yeah, just wanting to know,
Mm-hmm.
and then move forward from there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Shannon and Tracy, thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
I appreciate our conversation tonight, and always good nuggets for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you again
Me
for having
too.
us. Yes, it was
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for listening to Behaviorally Speaking, Leadership for Changemakers. And Shannon and Tracy, thank you again so much for sharing your experiences and wisdom across this 3-part series. Throughout the Regulated to Lead Trauma, Toxic Stress, and the Responsive Systems That Shape Behavior series, we explored a journey from awareness to responsive action to systems transformation. Our guests reminded us that resistance can be opportunity, that progress matters more than perfection, that curiosity can be more powerful than control, and that we are not just managing tasks as leaders, we are shaping environments that shape people. They also emphasize connection over control, response over reaction, and healing over harm. If you have a story about leadership and behavior from your community, share your story with us. If this series resonated, share it with someone and check out our companion blog, Behaviorally Speaking, Insights for Changemakers at esthercbubbabaservices.com/blog. For training, coaching, and behavior-based leadership support, visit esthercbubbabaservices.com. Until next time, lead with humanity and purpose. Practice with compassion and intention, and create meaningful, lasting change. And always remember, regulation shapes response. Response shapes culture, and culture shapes outcomes. This is Dr. Bubb. Stay inspired.